Charles, we are once again joined by an amazing guest. Today we've got author, columnist, pundit, and all-around great guy, Byron York.
Indeed, a proud conservative.
Hello, Byron.
Hi, folks. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a real pleasure, Byron. Before we get into your new book, Obsession, I just want to say that I have trouble watching Special Report, but I always enjoy watching it when you're on, because whatever the topic, you're level-headed, you're clinical, you often bring up things and perspectives that I hadn't thought about, so please stay on there if you can, because you do great work.
Special Report is a great show, and I'm happy to be part of it, and thanks for watching.
My pleasure. So your book, Obsession, has just come out. I've had the chance to read most of it. And I think it is just riveting. It almost, don't take this the wrong way, it almost reads like a spy novel in the sense that you want to keep reading it. And so very well done. It tells the tale of the Washington assault on Trump. And am I correct in saying that it really picks things up most after the election? It doesn't go way back into history. It kind of starts, yeah.
It does. You know, the way the book kind of got framed was, think back to December 2019, which was amazingly enough less than 1 year from now ago. December 2019, Democrats are racing to impeach President Trump in the House. And a reporter says to Nancy Pelosi, "What's the rush? I mean, what's the hurry here?" And she says, "There's no hurry. This has been going on for 2.5 years since the Mueller investigation started." And, you know, a lot of Republicans, I don't think Democrats paid much attention to what she said, but a lot of Republicans really listened to that and said, wow, she finally admitted it. This didn't start with Ukraine. It didn't start with a phone call. This is a continuation of a long, long effort to remove the president from office. And that's kind of how the book ended up being framed. It starts with the origins of the Mueller investigation, basically the president's terrible relationship with James Comey, and then how Mueller comes about. And then after that, you're off to the races with Mueller. And then Mueller, begins to just fade and eventually morphs into Ukraine, and you're off to the races again.
Yeah. Now, in writing this book, I believe you had access to a lot of people who are mentioned in the book. You did a lot of interviews. Did you get a chance to speak to the president?
I did not. And it was a decision I made. I will tell you, early on, I made a couple of perfunctory inquiries about it. Nothing happened. And then I had to think to myself, I was writing at this point, and the narrative seemed to be going well without the president being a character in it. And I mean, he's obviously a character. He's kind of what it's all about, but having a speaking role in it. And I decided fairly early on that I thought the story was going better without that. So that's what I decided to do.
Yeah, it sings. It's fantastic. How now that you've written this and you've had time to think about it, how do you explain the sort of leniency is not even the right word, the attitude of the Republicans in 17 and 18 to just let this thing run riot? I mean, how do we explain Paul Ryan? How do we explain other people just letting Rosenstein and Mueller continue with a project where there really was no obvious predicate?
I think you have to go back. One of the things I do early on, that in the Mueller report describes the president being shocked on May 17th, 2017, when Mueller is appointed. And basically Trump says, "That's it. That's the end of my presidency. I'm effed." I think there was a lot of misreading of that episode, of people saying Trump was showing consciousness of guilt. Now I'll finally be caught. I think you actually have to go back to the CIA leak affair, one of the great BS investigations of all time, to look and see what formed Trump's attitude. Back in 2003, 4, and 5, Democrats were angry at George W. Bush over the Iraq War, and there was a big brouhaha over a leak of the identity of a CIA agent. It's a long, complicated story. But the leaker was somebody very close to Colin Powell. And Democrats demanded an investigation, and nobody knew that it was actually this person, Richard Armitage, close to Colin Powell. And they appointed some of the same people, by the way, including James Comey, who actually appointed this guy, Patrick Fitzgerald, to be the special counsel. And Fitzgerald knew from day one of his investigation who had done the leak, that it was Richard Armitage. And he went on for 3 years. It just dragged on. It was enormously damaging to the Bush administration. They called Karl Rove in front of a grand jury 5 times. And they ended up charging one person, Scooter Libby, who was Vice President Cheney's chief of staff, with lying to investigators, a process crime. It wouldn't have happened if they hadn't have stretched this investigation out. So I think Trump knew that once a special counsel is appointed, these investigations tend to go on forever. Mm-hmm. They expand in scope. They do enormous damage, and they distract you and make it more difficult to govern. He knew all of that in the instant that he learns that Mueller has been appointed. And I think that's what made him react so negatively to that.
Yeah, and we speak, of course, nobody wants to see interference in an election, whether it's domestic parties interfering in the U.S. election or foreign parties. Indeed, we really shouldn't, as Americans, be interfering in foreign parties' elections. But would you agree that prolonging the Mueller investigation the way it was prolonged all the way through the 2018 election may have interfered, most likely did interfere in the outcome of the 2018 midterm elections?
Well, sure. Russia stayed alive is a very big issue in the voters' minds in 2018. I will tell you one of the stories I tell in this book is when Mueller is appointed, Trump wants the investigation to go quickly. He wants it over yesterday because he believes there was no collusion. There's nothing to prove there. So once Mueller finds that, he can close up shop and this will be over. And he actually pushes his lawyers to meet with Mueller. And they come up with a radical deal. And this is June of 2017, just weeks into Mueller's tenure. And the deal was basically this. It was, President Trump, I want this investigation to be over as soon as possible. There's nothing there. I want it to be over as soon as possible. Now you, Special Counsel Mueller, you're going to want all sorts of evidence from me. You're going to want thousands of pages of documents. You're going to want the testimony of people in the White House. Now, a lot of that would be covered by executive privilege. I could go to court, tie it up for years. But here's the deal. I'll give you everything you want, everything, if you will promise to get this over quickly. And Trump does it. It's like radical cooperation. Mm-hmm. He hands over all these documents. He allows all of his people in the White House to testify before Mueller. The White House counsel, the president, the lawyer for the presidency, testifies for 30 hours before Mueller. It's just unprecedented. And so by December, Trump knows, because they know who Mueller is, who's interviewing. He knows that Mueller has found no collusion. Right. It's a dry hole. And so in December, the lawyers meet, and the Trump lawyers say, look, you haven't found anything. Remember our bargain. You need to wrap this up. It's just not there. And Mueller says, well, I think to square our corners, which is a phrase that he used, which I think he meant to like dotting I's and crossing T's, to square our corners, we're going to need to talk to the president. Because at that moment, they had been shifting the investigation from collusion, which they didn't find, to obstruction. So they would be doing an investigation into alleged obstruction of justice, which could go on forever. Mm-hmm. And that's when relations between the two sides really just blow up. And the next year is one long fight about the president's testimony. But it's just an untold story of this amazing cooperation that the president offered, and then how it blew up.
Yeah, and I was struck in the very beginning. I'm not, although I studied politics in college many decades ago, I'm not a political operative, and I'm really not all that interested in the political sphere. I'm an investor. But I was struck at how odd it was that Mueller was able to pack his special team with rabid anti-Trump haters, and that continued forever. I mean, in the investment banking world that I used to work in, if you have a conflict of interest, you actually have to declare it, and your boss is going to decide, hey, you know, Byron, you can't work on this project, or maybe you shouldn't even work at the firm. But to pack what was supposed to be a neutral team with all these rabid Trump haters and have that go on through a 2018 election, I don't understand that.
A tiny, tiny percentage of Americans make significant political contributions above $200, which is the level at which they have to be reported to the FEC, a tiny number. And Mueller managed to pack his staff with a lot of them, who'd given a lot of money, all to Democrats. And with the exception of James Quarles, one top aide who had given one contribution to a Republican. And this, you know, Trump raised this as an objection. As a matter of fact, they raised it in that deal I was just talking about, which is when the lawyers were making the pitch to Mueller for the deal. Part of it was, look, the president has these objections. He thinks these are serious problems with your investigation, but he's going to put those aside in the hope of getting a quick resolution to this matter. Maybe getting ahead of your story a little bit. But later, when it's discovered that Mueller has had some rather serious cognitive difficulties, then people start wondering, well, who was actually in charge of this investigation? Was it Mueller, or was it these headstrong Democratic donors?
You know, speaking of cognitive difficulties, on page 37 of your book, I literally laughed out loud at the story you tell about what was supposed to be a perfunctory meeting of the joint session of the House and the Senate. Biden closes it out by saying, God save the Queen. I don't think he was joking. I think he probably thought he was in the Houses of Parliament in London, listening to Neil Kinnock.
Well, you know, I don't know what he was, you know, I don't know what he meant. Yeah. That was a weird thing. That was the first time that Republicans in the House got a sense of the intensity of the anti-Trump animus on the part of a lot of Democrats. Look, they knew that Democrats were stunned by Trump's victory and that they were having a hard time, you know, getting used to it. There's no doubt about that. But there's this ceremony, I think it was on January 6th of 2017, where the House is in session and the Senate comes over and they present the results of the Electoral College, and then those are certified, and then the winner is officially the next president. And it's a ceremony, right? It's not a decision; it's a ceremony. And a lot of Republicans told me they had come into office in 2009, and they went over and to listen to the certification for Barack Obama because they thought they just thought it felt so historic. And so that's the kind of occasion it is. Except Democrats were very mad. And when Joe Biden, who was the sitting vice president and had to preside over this, would call on a state, and the state's supposed to say, well, you know, the great state of Alabama, all of its electors are tried and true and certified, and we have, you know, X electoral votes for Donald Trump. There were several Democratic states, and they got up and they challenged, the members of Congress challenged the results in those states, challenged the Electoral College results, and said, a number of them cited Russian interference, that the election results in Massachusetts, for example, are not valid because Russians interfered in the election. And they didn't have any grounds to do this, and Biden gavelled them down every time. But Republicans were looking over saying, wow, what's going on here? These people are really having a hard time adjusting to the new president. And little did they know, you know, what was coming.
Yeah, I'd love to get into at the end a little bit what you think might be the rationale for all these veteran Washington, D.C. types to seemingly break norms, if not laws, in rejecting the outcome of what happened in 2016. But maybe we could spend a little bit of time on the Ukraine portion of it. Again, not as a Washington, D.C. hand like you, I don't understand why people were so terrified of naming the name of the supposed whistleblower that triggered the impeachment. It seems to me you have a right to face your accuser, generally speaking. Why do we all go along with this idea that we're not going to identify the whistleblower?
Yeah, it's interesting. And by the way, in the book, I do not name the name of the whistleblower, although I talk a lot about Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who Republicans believe basically gave the information to the whistleblower and essentially got the whole thing rolling. There came a time in spring of 2019, Mueller releases his report, and it shows that he could not establish that collusion took place. And a lot of Republicans are saying this is it. It's over. But a number of Democrats did not believe that at all. And they wanted to have a hearing with Mueller. And they wanted to have a kind of a Watergate moment in which Mueller is there. He's Mr. Rectitude, and he stands up and he delivers the damning evidence to Donald Trump in the House of Representatives. So they essentially forced Mueller to appear at a hearing. And it was July 24th, 2019. It was a disaster. But what's interesting is Republicans think it's all over at that point. The Trump team actually, they disbanded for a little while and took some vacation. It was time to hang out by the pool for a little while. Republicans on Capitol Hill relaxed. They think finally this Russia thing is over. And at that very time, although they don't know it, Adam Schiff is working and a whistleblower is working to come up with a new way to go after the president. And Republicans are stunned when they find out what's going on. There's a meeting in early September of the House Intelligence Committee. They've come back from break, and the Republicans think Schiff's got something going on. I don't know what it is, but he's got something going on. And one of them told me, Republican said, he wasn't giddy, but he was so anticipating that you really wondered what was going on. Mm-hmm. And some of the Republicans dismissed it. They thought, well, whatever he's got going on, if there's some whistleblower, he's got to be going back to the Russia well again. It's got to just be more Russia. But it was the Ukraine whistleblower. And what was bizarre about it, I mean, really bizarre, and I just have a difficult time even understanding today, is that it's impossible to lodge a whistleblower complaint against the President of the United States.
Right.
But there's no Inspector General for the White House, for the President of the United States. And in addition to that, there is a law, the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act, and it specifies what kind of complaints can be made under it, and it's complaints about alleged wrongdoing with people under the authority of the Director of National Intelligence. Now, the President of the United States is not under the authority of the Director of National Intelligence. The President does not work for the Director of National Intelligence. And we all have a kind of a colloquial understanding of what a whistleblower is. If you work for the Department of Interior and your superior is misusing the credit card, you can complain about it and not suffer retribution on the job. This is not that. It was an extraordinary abuse of the whistleblower laws. And yet Democrats were so determined to push this into the political sphere and into the sphere of impeachment that the fact that it was simply not called for under this law, they just ignored it and got away with it.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up, Jason has put up on the screen this Compass Rose legal group. They were, I don't think it was Chuck McCulloch who represented the whistleblower, but I think it was his partner. And the way I understand Washington, D.C., Mueller came out of WilmerHale, there's Williams and Connolly, there's some very big, powerful firms. Compass Rose is not one of them.
Right.
And I'm really curious, I don't know, you probably know Chuck McCulloch or you know of him. You're aware of his role as the Inspector General supposedly triggering the investigation into Hillary Clinton's email.
Yeah.
Right. And doesn't it strike you as a little odd that this guy would leave his post, end up working in this small firm, and then be dragged into this mess? As someone who likes to connect dots, I mean, I think this guy and the whole Hillary Clinton botched email investigation stands in such stark contrast to the tale you related,
Yeah.
how aggressively Mueller went against Trump and his associates and how they let Hillary Clinton off. And here you see the same guy's firm defending the whistleblower.
Yeah, when the whistleblower complaint came out, or when it was filed, I think it was August 12th, it was enormously professional. It was a polished legal document. And on the advice of Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee, the whistleblower went to this law firm and they put this together. But I think the bigger thing here is the stretching of the whistleblower laws that allowed this to happen. And basically, Democrats because they did control the House, they could have hearings and try to compel people to testify. They could do all this. Made such a big deal out of it that the absolute valid objections to this, that is simply not what was ever in a million years contemplated under the whistleblower laws, just disappeared.
Yeah, it kind of makes you think, and I think Washington, D.C. and parts of it are beautiful, but when you think about this and the way Flynn was treated and the way Emmett Sullivan's acting, you ask yourself, I ask myself as somebody who doesn't live in Washington, D.C., do I ever want to set foot in Washington, D.C.?
Well, if you do, and FBI agents want to talk to you, just a casual conversation,
Right.
don't do it. Just don't do it.
Now, speaking of that, I mentioned I might pick your brain a little bit about what might be the motivations of all these people to conspire to get President Trump. There's an FBI vault file series that has 41 parts. It's on Hillary Clinton, and you can get that online. In part 6, we've talked about this and written about it. In part 6 of that thing, there's reference to a senior State Department official walking in to the Washington field office of the FBI on January 27th, 2016. And he says in this extensive document, I sent a letter to Comey. I said I'm aware of criminal behavior on the part of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. I have evidence of it. I want to go into a SCIF. This is January 27th, 2016. And I want to brief Comey. And that didn't happen. I don't know if are you aware of that incident?
I am not aware of this. You're telling me, everything you're telling me is news to me.
Yeah. So I think, in thinking about why these characters, why these powerful people with so much on the line, in some cases so much money on the line, would break the rules you talk about, a whistleblower, the Constitution, it would seem, why they would throw all that stuff out the window. It must be because they're trying to cover up something we haven't yet discerned.
Well, they were trying to get Trump, and they look. One of the things I think that people might be reasonably concerned about if the president wins re-election is that what the resistance and what his opponents will do after that, because they've already tried the legal and constitutional means to remove him. And in the case of Ukraine, they had been depending on the Russia investigation for a couple of years. They had believed that it would give them the evidence they needed to impeach the president. And indeed, even after the Mueller fiasco, what's interesting is shortly before Mueller testified, Democrats were able to force these occasional votes, test votes on impeachment. The first one was in December 2017 when they were a minority. 66 Democrats voted for impeachment then. They had nothing. But shortly before Mueller testified, there was another one of these votes, and 95 Democrats voted for impeachment. And then after Mueller, Republicans thought that that'd be the end of it. It was just the opposite among Democrats. The number grew, and there were 114 Democrats who told the Washington Post that they supported impeachment. So they wanted to impeach him, and their chosen vehicle, which was the Russia investigation, petered out, but they had something new, Ukraine, and they just did it. I mean, I think that's the only way you can explain what they did. because the whistleblower laws they completely abused the whistleblower laws in the process, but they just did it.
Yeah, it's horrific. I mean, again, as an investor looking at the period 1988 to the present, I see a period where lots of folks around Washington, D.C. have gotten very rich, doing favors for donors. The American middle class has suffered, lower class has suffered across the political spectrum. And Michael Flynn had been threatening, or at least the rumor was, that he was going to, once he actually got into the saddle, he was going to look into swampish behavior, who was getting what private contracts. And I think long before that period, folks looked at Donald Trump and said, this is somebody we may not be able to manage. We've got to do everything we can to make sure he doesn't get to the heart of the matter, which is that a lot of people, in my opinion, sold us out, both parties.
Well, Trump presented an enormous threat, not just to Democrats, but to many people in the Republican Party. He threw out a number of Republican orthodoxies about trade, about immigration, about foreign entanglements in the 2016 campaign. One of the things that plays into this book, but I've never really come to a firm belief about, is why people who opposed Trump did it so emotionally, why it was so deep, so intense. I mean, you're seeing it right now. I mean, it hasn't gone away. Why the absolute intensity among the resistant types, among Democrats, among never-Trumpers, people who either are Republicans or used to be Republicans? The absolute intensity is something that I'm a little bit baffled by. They would say, "But can't you see he's so horrible?" But most of the rest of the country, I think, is not as agitated about it as they are.
Well, Byron, you said that you got a hard stop after 30 minutes. This is a great book. Obviously, people can get it all over the place, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Regnery, I think, I'll just tell you, here in New York City, it's very difficult to get a Regnery book right away for some unimaginable reason.
You mean they're not on every corner? I hope.
Yeah, exactly. You got the Louis Vuitton bag salesman on the corner, and then you got Regnery books. No.
Conservative books. That's good to hear. Well, listen, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Byron. Have a great time with this book.
Yep.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
The book is Obsession. Big thanks to Byron York for joining us. And Charles, that's another excellent guest for us to have here on the show.
Good. And we'll sign off and let Byron leave.
Yeah, it's always a little confusing for our guests with me as the host and the technical director. Thank you, Byron. Have a nice day. All right, there we go.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Honestly, if I don't like somebody, I will feel free, particularly on
Just
our
tell
show.
him right on the show.
Well, but no, I mean, I wanted him to know that at least one person who watched the special report finds him interesting. And I actually look forward to, I look forward to his perspective, whereas I really don't care what Juan Williams has to say and
Right.
a bunch of the other guests that they slam in there. I mean, if I wanted to watch MSNBC, I think I still remember how to watch MSNBC by switching the channel. In contrast, Byron, as you saw in our interview, I mean, he's a very thoughtful, level-headed, he does proudly say he's a conservative, and I believe he is, but he doesn't, it's not like he can't try to understand another perspective, which is, the cancel culture. What we see is they figure out, you remember our walk down Broadway when we were getting to that place where people were chalking on Riverside Drive or wherever it was Broadway.
Oh, right.
And you just asked a question and they turned to you, the lady said, "Well, are you a supporter?" Like,
No,
I
she
can't
said,
ask
"You
a
look
question.
like a troll." And I was like, wait a minute, you look like you haven't showered in weeks or had a haircut in months, and you're about 200 pounds overweight, and I look like a troll.
Right. But you see, it's refreshing to have people like Byron who he didn't necessarily know whether or not, I suppose if he did homework, he knew I'm not a liberal, but he was just very matter-of-factly answer the questions.
Well, the whole book is like that.
Yeah.
Or I should say the part that I read. I can't read as quickly as you can, but it's a good book for people to read if they think that Donald Trump is guilty of all this stuff, because he just methodically goes through there and says they presented this, no evidence. They presented this, no evidence. It's amazing how, if I talk about something here on Crowdsource the Truth, whatever it is, 9/11, the pandemic, the Vegas shooting, whatever, there's a lot of people say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory.
Right.
But we're focusing on evidence. We're focusing on elements of an investigation that's maybe incomplete. But yet it's the same group of people who champion this whole Russia hack thing. There's not been one element of evidence that supports that. And when you talk to somebody who thinks that that happened, they say, oh, but Michael Flynn pled guilty. They always want to do that, Charles. They sort of set a flag in the ground, and then you can't go back and say, well, where did that flag come from? This is the new starting point.
Right. Well, so it was unfair. I didn't want it to ask Byron a whole bunch of questions about stuff that's not in his book. I did manage to ask a few, but I really do think that what was going on here is that, as in the case of the 1992 campaign, when the Clintons pioneered the idea of a war room, ever since then, particularly while Bill was president, and when Hillary was senator, then Secretary of State, they have a vast database, as a guess, somewhere, probably in the Clinton Foundation, but somewhere, of all of their supposed rivals, all the dirt they need. And they've been using that to cement their political power here in New York and in Washington, D.C. and around the world. Bill has an extensive Rolodex. I suppose he's likable by some people. And Hillary, we don't need to bash her more than I regularly do on a daily basis. So, so they've been using this information they have as leverage for a long time, and they got away with it. They thought in the 93 to 2001 period, until Gore lost, they thought Gore would win, and they thought there'd never be another Republican leadership period in this country during their lifetimes. Well, they were wrong. So they had to figure out, could they get leverage against George W.? And my suspicion is they have leverage against George W. because they also had leverage against George H.W. And so a period ensued, a surprising period ensued from January 2001 to January 2009, where even though George W. Bush was president, even though from February 2001 forward, through sometime in 2005, the FBI, in theory, and the Southern District of New York were investigating the Clinton Foundation and Bill and Hillary personally for corruption and fraud. Even though that was happening under a Republican president and a Republican Department of Justice and an IRS overseen by Republicans, the Clintons somehow managed to get away with all that and then get through Kerry's disastrous belly flop in 2004, the opening of the Clinton Foundation, November 18th, 2004 in Little Rock. They get through all that, and this dude, my distant cousin, and his crack team of crackerjack people, they can't figure out that there is no organization called the William J. Clinton Presidential. There just isn't one.
But they're not trying to figure that out, are they?
I don't know. I mean, what were they doing for 4 years at the FBI? I mean, when you go and you have as this idiot Stringer in New York, the controller, and Cuomo, who's dumber than a brick, and the Democrats who are just economically illiterate, they're all talking about how we need to raise your taxes. The rich
Everyone's going to move out.
Well, but beyond that, I mean, you should have been able. Well, the reason people like me don't think it's fair to raise taxes.
Oh my God, he's running for mayor, Charles.
Stringer, really?
Oh boy, just when you thought there couldn't be a bigger idiot in there.
That's right. Dumber than a box of rocks.
How do you go about running for mayor?
I don't know.
I don't think I could do it.
We call me a battle-tested career politician. But anyway, so going back, though, to this FBI matter, it should have taken the forensic line people, line accountants of the FBI and the IRS, about 36 hours on the inside, maybe if you're not going to work around the clock, maybe 100 hours, to establish in February 2001 the Clinton Foundation did not exist as an organization and therefore was a fraud and had not, registered in New York as it needed to. It had solicited in New York. Denise Rich had made 3 contributions from New York. Bill had done numerous fundraising exercises into Denise Rich's Fifth Avenue apartment. How could they not have seen that promptly? And the fact that they didn't see it, but then burned how much money we don't know over 4 years, pretending to investigate, and then saying, well, just let it go, even though the thing doesn't have audits, doesn't have anything.
How do you like this photo, Charles?
Wow, is that a Halloween shot?
That's Michael Jackson and Denise Rich with a plump Bill Clinton. I mean, this must be sometime in the 90s before he had his heart attack and became a vegan.
Right. Who just went off being a vegan? It was Miley Cyrus.
Did she?
Yeah, she
I'm
just...
surprised that you know that. Why did she?
Well, I regularly read the National Enquirer and all.
But why did she go off being a vegan?
She just
Too
couldn't...
hungry?
Yeah, she got hungry. She wasn't feeling well.
Doesn't make sense to me unless you're a cow to eat nothing but vegetables.
Right. So just let's go back into this period. As I say, it's 1988 to 2016. We could go back further than that. The reason I like to start in '88 is that's when the Berlin Wall started tumbling down. That's when right after that the Tiananmen Square happened, and China's decided, you know what, let's pretend that we're going to be a capitalist country, even though we're communists. And the Indians later in 1995, they said, all right, socialism, AOC probably thinks it works. Mini AOC as she was back then, really mini. She was 5 years old or something.
Is India socialist?
It was. No, India was it was very much for a long, long time. They thought they had a third way or a different model, and they'd like to call it either socialism or whatever. And you hear my friends who grew up in that environment, and most of them fled India because it was such a disaster.
Right.
When Manmohan Singh, the finance minister, the guy who popularized India Inc., took over, there was
the actual
INC Incorporated, and pushed India down the path that China followed in a very headlong fashion. There ensued this period, 88 to 2016, where suddenly the largest market in the world, our market, was very interesting to Indian and Chinese companies and to American multinationals who wanted to make their stuff in plants and offices where nobody would enforce the rules in India and China, and turn around and send those products in, competing with American manufacturers who couldn't compete on cost, competing with European and Japanese manufacturers. That model from 88 to 2016 was a model that made a lot of fixers very rich, a lot of political families, dynastic political families, very rich. And a lot of people like Rajat Gupta at McKinsey, investment firms, private equity firms, hedge funds, et cetera, banks, made this whole project, made all of them rich. The problem is, where we were on a trajectory to have jobs go like this, and really soar from 82 to 88, continue the Reagan boom, as these proponents of unregulated globalism got stuck in and paid off really pittance money to the Bush family, the H.W. Bush family, and pittance money to the Clintons, and pittance money to W, and then pittance money to Obama. I think Trump saw this, and it's and he sees it now. I mean, he looks at a project and he can tell probably better than anybody, this is a winner and it isn't a winner, and here's a chance to turn $1 million into 50 million, or 50 million into 5 billion, or whatever, and here's a chance to turn 50 million into losing $500 million.
Yeah.
Something that Biden can't, tell whether, it's a chance to, eat a sandwich or, go to sleep at this point. He's spouting gibberish. But the Washington crowd.
It's like, what's a sandwich?
Exactly. Didn't I already eat that? But but I think an answer to the question I posed to Byron is that the folks who studied Trump and what he was saying, and thought about the people who are close to Trump, and thought about the people who are pulling levers and were pulling levers, understood that Trump was going to dismantle this unregulated globalism that was a gravy train for so many people, and furthermore, that he was going to go back into the past and root out the fraud, root out the corruption, and once he found his feet, that he was going to hit back way harder than the resistance has hit him to date. And that's why they tried to preemptively take him out and keep him on a back foot. They knew they had an advantage over Trump in the very beginning, and all incoming presidents likely, had the same issue. As a guess, if you're a normal human being, and anybody running for president is probably not that normal, but if you think about it, I know I'd probably feel this way. I wouldn't want to jinx my chances of of winning by making extensive plans for how I was going to run the country, assuming I won. And I know that was the case with Trump. He's more or less said it. He didn't want to do that, and others may not have wanted to do that. And certainly the Clintons didn't expect to win back in '92. I mean, George H.W. Bush was off the charts.
But do you think somebody goes into somebody like that expecting not to win?
Well, I mean, yeah. In the case of it was early for Bill to run. He was young, very young.
The Stevens wanted him to run, according to Larry Nichols.
Well, that's fine, but I mean, that's a rich family. But I mean, he still, challenged merchandise even back then. And there were people who thought that he should have waited another 4 years or something like that.
He just said White House, and he was like,
well, that's great. But anyway, I think that people understood that Trump was going to basically attack the swamp, and they've been trying to keep him on a back foot. And he really, he did a lot. He works enormously hard, and he got a lot of stuff early on. But he did make mistakes in the beginning.
Yeah,
and anybody would. I mean, I believe Barack Obama walked into a door, like hard in the White House. You're finding your way around. Trump probably lives in homes that are bigger than the White House, but for most ordinary people, you go from living
giant mansion.
Yeah, suddenly you've got hot and cold running butlers or waitresses and food and this and that. You're flying around in, Air Force One and limousines, and it's heady. And now you also have to work. I mean, you can't say, I'm going to be late for work this morning. I can't make it from the top to the.
I thought about that. It's sort of like it's a work from home job. It's like, wait, that's weird. Why don't they have a separate office and a house?
Exactly.
I guess it's kind of like security and everything.
I have never been in there, but people who have tell me that it's actually much, once you get inside, the Oval Office is smaller than you think, and the rooms are smaller and older and whatever. Nonetheless, they had Trump on the back foot, and I didn't really want to, get into this too much with Byron. Maybe we'll have another chance. But I mentioned the issue of conflicts of interest. I mean, the last person people I would put on a team to get to the bottom of Russian collusion, in theory, are the very people who are trying to cover up the fact that they missed the Clinton Foundation investigation. They missed the fact that the Clinton Foundation and maybe the Bush Foundation and certainly the Obama Foundation are conduits for these donors, these foreign governments, to basically corrupt people who are willing to be corrupted, who exercise control over the levers of power in Washington, D.C. Mueller, to be charitable, missed the Clinton Foundation investigation. He was head of the FBI beginning September, was it
2001.
7th, was it? Or
September 4th,
2001. That's right. September 4th, 2001 to September 4th, 2013. Comey...
Second longest tenure of anybody to run the FBI.
Right. So he was there the whole while the Clinton Foundation, which didn't lawfully exist, supposedly took shape in New York when it didn't bother to register. But you go on and on and on.
He didn't investigate 9/11.
He didn't well, yeah, that's another story. But just staying narrowly for a second on Clinton Foundation, Comey, is brought in after 9/11 because Mary Jo White, who was the first U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York.
He was like the deputy attorney general or something.
No, first Comey was brought in to replace Mary Jo White. And she had been, if you look in the FBI vault file in the Clinton Foundation investigation, parts 1 to 3, it's obvious Mary Jo White was working her butt off to make progress. She convened grand juries, she collected evidence, multiple interviews, all kinds of stuff. I mean, they didn't bother to get to the actual nub of the real problem with the Clinton Foundation. But then they bring in Comey in December. They brief him of 2001. You want to look at the William J. Clinton Foundation. They didn't bother to actually find the obvious fraud, but they did make a lot of progress, as you could tell by reviewing this stuff. They didn't even figure out, for example, that the thing wasn't called William J. Clinton Foundation in this time frame. I mean, little things like that. If you're trying to investigate something, useful to know its name, its real name.
Speaking of useful, there was tons of useful information in Byron's book, even for people who know quite a lot about the details of what happened as it was happening. Like he said that the contemporaneous notes of an FBI agent are admissible evidence in court. That's crazy. I mean, that's a great idea if it's 1940 and a tape recorder is the size of this couch, but that should be absolutely illegal. The FBI should have to make some sort of a digitally encrypted recording of a conversation, and that should be... I don't understand why lawyers are opposed to actual recordings of conversation.
Because those can be fixed too.
Well, but something written down by a person can be altered the moment they're writing it down.
Well, actually, one of our friends was through a process like this in another country. We won't say who it is or what country, but in that country, when you take, it even goes further, when you take a deposition or you interview somebody, a transcript is typed up of that interview, and the target of the interview, or whoever's being interviewed, has to sign that they agree that that's what happened.
That makes sense.
You know, something like that would make sense.
Because I've seen these stenographers, like I've been purchasing and reading a lot of court transcripts, Charles.
Really? Oh, that's
There's
good.
errors in them.
Yeah. So just if I can finish the train of thing. So you have one challenged person in Mueller who didn't see the obvious Clinton Foundation frauds for years. He didn't see them from September 4th, 2001, right through September 1st, 2013. You have dopey James Comey, who actually led as U.S. Attorney an investigation into the Clinton Foundation frauds, which I think he circumscribed. He cut it back. He may have on purpose decided not to find the problem. He was then, because he did such a good job screwing that up, he was promoted to Rod Rosenstein's job, the Deputy Attorney General, through 2005. And so he technically oversaw all Justice Department activities.
And the Valerie Plame thing. It was all the same people covering that up.
And the person in this time frame who also was in the Department of Justice in charge of deciding which frauds get prosecuted was none other than Rat Rosenstein. Yeah. And, you know, so to say you find yourself, you know, by the turnip truck on May 17th, 2017, and the Rat comes in and says, I've got just the team to figure out Russian collusion. We'll take all the folks who missed the Clinton Foundation frauds. That's going to be our team. We'll have Mueller lead it, because he definitely has a lot of exposure. We'll have, you know, I'll oversee Mueller, because I have a lot of exposure, and then we'll let all these other guys get in there.
Who've paid the Clinton campaign.
Right. And then you scroll forward. Originally, we've had presentations on this, but into 2015. Well, let's start in 2013. Actually, we're here in studio, so we can maybe do this. If Jason, if we go to Google for a second,
yeah,
and we get what I'd love to do is Clinton Foundation Annual, and I'd love to take the 2012 original, not the amended, 2012 990. Not amended, yeah, not that one. Yeah. Okay, now we go through the directors. It's past the BKD. It's like 25 pages past here. There's a statement of the directors. It's like part 6 or 7. We're going to be north past here. All right, slowly now. I think it's the next page, or maybe page after. Page after. Where are you? Okay, here we go. All right. Notice this, Jason. This says, list all of the organization's current officers, directors, trustees, regardless whether individuals or employees. Okay? It also says list all of the organization's current key employees. It doesn't say historical. It doesn't say current. Current, we're going to debate the meaning of the word is and the and whatever. Current means as of the date and the filing of this document.
1,000 cards.
Right. So go down the page a little bit here, and you'll see that this thing is dated November 15th, 2013. Okay?
Yeah.
It purports to be a report for what happened in 2012 for an entity called, if you look at the top of it, they say it's called Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation in 2012. But it wasn't. It wasn't. The name of the foundation may have been changed. I would argue it wasn't lawfully changed. April 9th, 2013. Okay, from, in theory, William J. Clinton Foundation to, in theory, Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation. But that whole effort was not done properly. And so therefore the name is wrong. And they say that on this date, as of November 15th, 2013, there are 3 trustees or directors: Lindsay, McAuliffe, Chelsea Clinton. Lindsay, McAuliffe, Chelsea Clinton. Okay? Now, this is on November 15th, 2013. Okay? This is what this says. No tricks here at all. Now, then we go to the 2013 990 and we look at the same page.
So we're going to go back to here.
Yeah. Go to 2013, not amended, but just, we can do amended later. But, okay, here's this, and about the same distance in as you had before, in the 2012. You're very close now. There you go. Okay, now go down this a little bit. Now this says that Bruce R. Lindsay was CEO until July 2013. This says that Terence McAuliffe was a director until November 5th, 2013. This document was filed after the one you just saw. So this is flatly contradicting the other one. This is saying that McAuliffe was only a director through November 5th, 2013. The other document said through November 15th, 2013.
They didn't even check their own
this is their own
documents.
Work, right? And it says here that Eric Braverman is the CEO and a trustee beginning July 2013. Okay? But he couldn't have been a director beginning July 2013 unless the 2012 thing, they were lying. Okay?
Well, that's a very
highly likely
possibility.
Right. So if we go now, Jason, into the New York State Registry.
The Charities Bureau?
Yep. Yep. And we put in 31-158-0204, and we hit search. There's a similar filing. I can't get it for you right now, but it's a similar filing like this in Georgia. We hit that. We go to the bylaws. First thing, bylaws, organizational rules. Okay, these were filed in New York on June 27th, 2017. They've never been properly explained. I think, never been properly explained. This is, we saw this before, the type looks odd, doesn't it? It doesn't look, if this were a real computer-generated document, it wouldn't do that.
Well, I agree, except it looks like it's kind of folded all the way through this section of the document. It's strange.
Yeah. But if we go to the end of this document.
The very end?
Yeah. We will see that it is signed at the very end. It states that this, the end of the document itself. Okay, right there.
Right. Well,
this is adopted this 10th day of September 2015, right? Now,
the 5 years ago?
Yeah, but the version that is in Georgia and not in New York is also signed, and that doesn't really look to me like Bruce Lindsay's real signature.
Looks very unsteady.
Yeah,
but didn't he have a stroke, you said?
He did, but there are other examples, and we'll do a Bruce Lindsay signature comparison at another time. But the first time they were amended was on the 2nd day of November 2013. The 2nd day of November 2013. So that one says that you're going to divide the board into classes. There's going to be Class A and Class B, and the Class A directors are going to be Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea. And it said it was adopted the 2nd day of November 2013. So in summary, we could demonstrate, and we are just now talking about this for less than 10 minutes, to anybody who knows anything about charity law, we can demonstrate that there was no organization in 2013 called Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation that had complied with its original application for federal tax exemption back on December 23rd, 1997, that had continuously operated in conformity with Arkansas, other state, and federal
law whatsoever.
Right, so there was no organization. Now, why is this interesting? Because on February 1st, 2013, Hillary Clinton, stumbles out of the State Department for the last time, stealing as much as
Office supplies,
whatever, notes, and how they kept track of all of these presidential records, because many of them are, as somebody very high in government who was reporting to Barack Obama, much of what she kept may well have been presidential records. What did they keep all these electronic versions? Did they have hard copy versions? As a guess, they kept some of them. They didn't keep them in the Chappaqua toilet bowl server room. They kept it probably at the Clinton Foundation in Little Rock, or maybe in the offices in New York.
I'm thinking the fireplace.
No, but they needed to keep track of other things. Like if you want to make sure, if you're going to be in a frequent briber program, you don't want
loyalty points.
Yeah, you don't want to forget that well, Victor Pinchuk gave me $25 million. I thought he only gave me $250,000. He comes rolling in expecting a 9-course state dinner, and you say, well, look, how about the Happy Meal over here from McDonald's? Like, you can't get that kind of stuff wrong if you want to be in the repeat bribery and corruption business. And I bring that up to say that Pinchuk and his wife were mega donors to the Clinton Foundation, in particular, beginning around 2004, when the Clinton Foundation illegally began to perform operations, according to multiple press releases, in Ukraine, with money that came from this Ukrainian oligarch. So I bring all this up to say, if you're on a project to understand why Mueller, Rosenstein, Comey, and others are trying to get Trump, you have to know this history. You have to know the degree to which the Clintons were taking dirty money through the Clinton Foundation, the fact that they didn't have an accounting firm by design who would check any of this, and that they'd engage in this project where people believe to this day that there is, in fact, an organization called the Clinton Foundation.
They get mad when you tell them anything other.
Right. It's become a religion almost. You have to take it on faith. Just give me 10% of your money and you'll go to heaven. I mean, this exercise here is, a large cover-up is ongoing. And hats off to Byron for taking us through from the inside, from his many contacts, on the degree to which, these people threw a lot of mud at Trump. Unfortunately, it didn't stick.
Well, I mean, he said something during our conversation that did stick with me, which is that I think we agree that it's very likely that Donald Trump will win. Joe Biden is the closest thing to a completely impotent candidate that I've ever observed for anything.
I mean, I think you could take, and I mean, if you got up at 6:30 in the morning and with, treating these people really with deference or whatever, and selected 100 people sleeping on park benches or elsewhere,
you'll probably get
any one of them in the first 60 seconds of waking up would have more cogent ideas about what to do with this country than Joe Biden. It's that bad.
Charles, I received a call from the Democrats. They want to run that clay statue of Hillary Clinton as a candidate. It would be better than Joe Biden. Yeah. But the thing that Byron said that really stuck with me is that once Trump does win, then what? The rioting and the craziness could really...
I think this is a lot like as happened in 2007. If you read Daniel Halper's great book, Clinton Inc., he recounts how the Clinton team, before she formally announced, went out to Democrats and said, listen, Hillary is going to win. She's going to be the nominee. She's going to beat any Republican, and just don't fuck around. Don't cross her, because if you do, strange things happen. I mean, so many words to people who...
You've heard of Vince Foster, right?
Right. So that was very much their approach. And these lepers don't change their spots at this point in their lives. I mean, they're stuck in this approach. So I think they were very aggressive, and they continue to try to be aggressive. And so going back to 2013, they storm out of the State Department with all this information. Hillary lands at the Clinton Foundation. She takes over a lot of space. Now, nobody said, no, wait a minute. She may not be getting a salary, but why should we give her free office space for all of her aides and salaries for her aides? And what's that? How is that consistent with anything that's charitable? And we give her all this free publicity about this project she's doing, Vital Voices, or you name it. too small.
Using up all the toner in the fax machine.
Right, exactly. Whatever.
Who put the coffee grounds in the garbage disposal?
And you know what you learn when you operate multiple businesses at once is that you can have a question of allocation. So you could say Hillary Clinton and Chelsea and Bill Clinton, they didn't take a penny of salary. And you say, well, that's wonderful, how noble of them. But they did charge, tens of millions of dollars in expenses through, claiming that it was, for the purpose of the charity. And, they would get to an event somewhere, and yes, they might utter some turgid speech or whatever, but the real thing they were doing is getting by private plane to a place. Who knows what else was on that plane, what hanky-panky happened on the plane.
What other negotiating they're doing while they're there.
Right, exactly. And there was no accountant worth a damn checking any of this work to say, wait a minute, you can't say that Chelsea Clinton deserves to have a private plane to take her anywhere for fear of security risks. So 2013, she gets ensconced. Eventually, John Kerry decides to have a State Department Inspector General. Eventually, that person says, WTF, mate, where are all of her records and what's going on?
Something weird happened with our audio, Charles. We're going to see if we can get it back. But there's always... Slightly awkward moment, Charles. The computer that processes the audio has frozen for the first time ever out of nowhere.
It's getting cold.
Yeah, it's going to be virtually impossible for people to hear you, but I will be able to recover this in just a moment. I'm glad this didn't happen while we had the illustrious Byron York on the show, and comments, people are saying, okay, back, okay, right, but it's not going to work. We got to just wait a moment. This will come back on, and then we'll fix it. Complicated world of technical stuff, Charles. I wonder if I could win an Emmy for this.
High-tech Gremlin Award.
Yeah. Best recovery from frequent crashes. Well, one of the things that I've done, Charles, to help minimize this type of thing is that the entire show relies on an array of redundant systems now. And let's see, I think this should help. Let's just try and see if this brings it back. Should switch over any moment here. Check, check, check. Okay.
Good. So what I would suggest, we've got a few more minutes. There has been a monumental development that we need to talk about a little bit.
Yeah.
This morning, the reports came out of Norway that a member of parliament named, there you go, and I'm going to slaughter his name. It's Tubringetta. Yeah, Tubringetta, Christian Tubringetta, has nominated President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. And what's really interesting about this, we'll get to the stuff that our audience may not know, but we'll share. What's really interesting is that in the nominating letter, this very smart and very powerful person, rising star in Norway, in Parliament in Norway, noted that the first reason Donald Trump deserves the award is that since Jimmy Carter, he's the first American president he's on Rising.
That's him.
With John Solomon?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know about Rising, but he's actually doing something towards peace rather than getting the Nobel Peace Prize and then bombing everybody.
Right, exactly. Started wars in Syria and Libya, but no. So he notes that Donald Trump is the first president since Jimmy Carter who has not actually started a war while president, or a new conflict zone. Then we have the fact that he talks about this peace deal with the UAE, and the peace deal with the UAE is noteworthy. I mean, I've been several times through there. You've been there. It's a rich Gulf kingdom that, unlike Saudi Arabia, has a small population.
Great food.
Has good food, and it's got actually good airlines in and out. I frequently, when going further than UAE, I go through the UAE.
Emirates is very good.
Yeah, great airline. But anyway, this plan that was trashed immediately was announced by so many on the left, and Trump's initial foray. You remember his first trip. Trump's first foreign trip was to the Vatican, to Saudi Arabia.
I thought
Israel,
Japan.
No, that was the first person he received. His first foreign visit was he landed in Riyadh, got the sword dance.
Oh, right, and
then he went
put
to
their hands
Israel.
on that globe.
Then he went to Israel, and then he went to the Vatican. So the Earth's three monotheistic religions. And people at the time thought that it was ridiculous that Jared Kushner would be given responsibility at such a young age for trying to forge any kind of deal. They ridiculed the elements of the first agreement, his objectives. He was talked down to by people around the region. And presto changeo, now we have a deal with UAE and Israel. It's amazing.
It is.
And other nations in the Gulf area, in the Middle East and across Africa, are looking at this and saying, on the one hand, yeah, there's a Palestinian issue, but they won't negotiate. They won't account for all the money we give them. They're blowing things up. They're they're nettlesome. They're in close with Iran. We don't like what Iran's doing, and this is a game changer that happened. It's already happened, and on top of which, other nations in the region are saying, I don't want to be the last person to follow suit here. I don't want. My options are I can turn my country into Beirut or into the West Bank, or I can turn my country into Dubai,
Right.
or you pick another country that's going in the right direction economically. So I think you're going to see, the big move happen. Now he gets nominated for this prize, and the thing I love about the nomination letter is he goes through the different reasons, and at the end he says, Donald Trump has actually gotten some solid accomplishments. He deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, unlike Barack Obama, who got the Nobel Peace Prize for doing absolutely nothing. He says this in the...
Well, that is amazing that the guy said that. Before we look at the letter, Charles, I just want to ask you about this picture because it is so odd, and even the title of this New York Times article is What's Going On with That Orb. It almost looks like Melania is like, Donald, you and your friends need to get this out of here. Dinner is starting.
Right, stop playing. And the king is like, can I sit down?
Yeah. She's just not interested at all. But this is a Palantir globe inside this is some kind of counter-terrorism center in Saudi Arabia. And they're wondering what was going on with that glowing orb. It's a Palantir thing.
You mean it made by Palantir?
It's some sort of control interface for Palantir, I'm pretty sure. President Fattah al-Sisi of Egypt, King Salman, opening of an anti-extremist center. It's something to do with Palantir.
But that's really something, think about it, for the king of Saudi Arabia to stand up and say, we are now going to team to fight extremism around the world, when radical Islamic extremism is fought in the name of Saudi Arabia, as we learned on September 11th, 2001. So this is quite a big change, and I would agree with our this strong pioneer out of Norway. We can reveal that we've talked about the fact that you and I went to Norway in January of this year, and we had productive meetings through our good friend with lots of different people across the political spectrum, including this person.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to say that.
That's fine. No, I mean, I'm allowed to. I don't have to check with
we don't have to
Adam
register
Schiff or the New York Times or
Yeah.
We're not foreign agents. We're not.
We just talk to the guy.
Yeah, and others.
and had to pay to go. So
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. We're not reimbursed one iota. So
It's actually, Norwegian Air still owes me $65 for
Really?
Wi-Fi that didn't work, and I did not like Norwegian Air.
But I think we both liked this guy, and
Yes.
and when we started on this project, when I first looked at the Clinton Foundation in 2015, it was clear that Norway was all in for Hillary Clinton. They loved the Clintons. The notion that you were going to get, they expected in 15. They expected
Gru Harlan, what's her name?
Brundtland and other.
She's all up in the WHO and all that.
Well, before that, she's the one of 1992 Rio Summit. I mean, this is a team. Norway is a team that loves, or parts of it loved, unregulated globalism. They're a relatively small country in terms of people, big country geographically, a lot of wealth, but they saw the globalist project as a great project. You support it, modest contributions get you outsized roles at the WHO or the UN Security Council, you name it.
When they've got that huge sovereign wealth fund from discovering oil.
Right, and gas, and they're blessed with hydroelectric power, so they're energy-rich superpower, small bunch of people really, and a long tradition now, decades-long tradition of giving a lot of money away for these prestige development projects, and so a lot of Norwegians, frankly, and the people that are influence shapers, all were just wedded to unregulated globalism, couldn't see any reason to challenge that or socialism. When we started on this project, and here's a guy in Parliament, his wife was, I think, in the cabinet, who is a very smart person, both of them are smart, now going out on a limb, and I was talking actually right before air with a contact tied into that country who was telling me that it's amazing to contrast, look at this, 15,000 shares for this article, and Joe Concha's a good guy who writes about media stuff, yet in Norway, their initial response was, we're not going to cover this.
What?
Yeah, well, they don't understand yet what's happened. This is a lead story on Rantingly, which is a great site. I actually sent a DM to the person who ran Rantingly, urging that person to take a look at it, and they did and decided on their own to put it, the lead story on Rantingly. Then we have, it was picked up by Zero Hedge, it's picked up all over the place. And as a guess, it'll be covered extensively in the news as people start to say, why would this Norwegian up-and-coming guy, why would he nominate Trump? And this person, his international following is going to go from wherever it was to
1 million.
Yeah.
I mean, realistically speaking, how many people outside of Norway are aware of members of parliament by name? I mean, even within Norway, I wonder how many people know the name. People in the United States, other than Ocasio-Cortez, Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and a few, we don't even know who's in Congress.
This is CTG.
I know,
AOC.
exactly.
He's CTG.
We need now a mini CTG as well. He kind of looks like Jason Bateman. Jason Bateman could play him in the movie.
Good, but I think it's a very interesting development, and
The Progress Party, that was the name I was thinking of.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this is a great move, Charles, I have to say, and I do think it is well deserved. Despite the things about Donald Trump that we would like to be different, I have to say I still really like what he's been doing as president. Nobody's perfect. There's things that he's done that I don't care for, that I would have done differently, that I hope he will change. But there was one more thing I wanted to bring to your attention about the, not that New York Times article, the thing with the Palantir Globe. It seems to me, Charles, that there's a definite power struggle underway in the Saudi Arabian royal family. And this article came out in May of 2017, several months before the Las Vegas shooting. And there's a lot of research that's been done about Saudi involvement in the Las Vegas shooting. We know that the Crown Prince, there was a shooting at the palace in Jeddah just a few days later. He was shot, and it was in November, right after the October 2017 shooting that they locked up all those guys in the Ritz-Carlton.
Right. Well, of course, the history of Saudi Arabia, indeed, starting with its founding, is a history of internecine family warfare. That's just the way they roll. And I've had the pleasure, actually, of spending quality time with the person who's now dead, sadly, but who would be the next king. This guy's eldest son was an investor in a firm that I created, and I spent I had the displeasure of spending time with this guy. I'm delighted that he was hung upside down. I hope it really hurt and cost him a lot of money in Saudi Arabia.
I think he had to pay billions, didn't he?
And I also had the pleasure, though, of several times meeting with the money people, or people who handled the money for the family that ran the country before it was called Saudi Arabia, who were displaced by the South. So that's just the way it works. They all are constantly battling. But to see, and it's not, if you're, talk about inequality in Saudi Arabia, I mean, the rich in Saudi Arabia are unbelievably rich.
And the poor are dirt poor.
Well, they're not dirt poor, but they're just, some are very happy to be living out in the desert, nomad-like, stuff like that. But it's just, there's massive inequality there. And there's only so many members of the royal family. And there's, I forget how many, 27 million or something like that in Saudi Arabia. So you're always worried as a rich member. And then beyond that, one day your cousin is a friend, the next day he's trying to kill you.
Yeah, that's really...
So for the king at his age to stand up and to pick MBS, to have MBS work very closely with Jared Kushner, who is an Orthodox Jew, or at least a very conservative Jew, would have been unthinkable in 2000. So just think how much the Middle East has changed from 2000 to 2020. So that's one thing.
Who's this guy all the way on the right?
That's the former president of Goldman Sachs, co-president of Goldman Sachs, who's out. He's a never-Trumper.
What's he doing there?
I think he's doing various investment. I mean, he's very wealthy, and he was he the chief of staff or what? I forget what he was exactly, but the name will come to me. But he was co-president of Goldman Sachs.
Interesting.
So the decision on who wins the Nobel will be announced October 9th at 10 a.m. Norway time. So,
wow. Oh, that's a good October surprise.
So we'll see. I mean, either way, I think Trump wins either way here. If he doesn't get it, he can always say, well, Obama got it. Yes, Obama got it for nothing, so I guess I should have done nothing. If he does get it, it's like, holy smokes. And one thing I would say, based, not revealing any confidences, there are folks in Norway who I'm in touch with and who are very interested in continuing the long and fine tradition of trying to do good around the world with their own money, making donations. But they don't want to see it stolen by the Clintons and people like the Clintons and other folks who are very happy inside their country and outside their country to talk smack about how they're going to fight poverty or fight AIDS, do it. And really what they're doing is just making sure that the dumb schmuck governments around the world that aren't going to check anything, including our own, prior to Trump, will continue to send, tens of billions around the world to far-flung places that no auditor is going to want to visit. It's almost like perfect crime because you sit there, perfect quotes, you sit there, and you could spin out, all sorts of initiatives that sound wonderful. We're going to spend $500 million to train young mothers to breastfeed their babies better across sub-Saharan Africa and the poorest nations in Asia. And don't worry, we'll handle it. Just send the money. Don't think twice about the fact that it's an American project. We want you to send the money to Switzerland. Nothing's going to happen there. Not a tradition of diverting money. Not a legal system that makes it very difficult to check anything. Just send me your money and you will get a report. And I'm telling you, it's going to be beautiful. In fact, if you don't ask any questions, maybe we'll hire your daughter to write the report. And then we'll hire your son to be in a consulting firm to study this. And we'll make sure that when you go to try to find those breastfeeding mothers in Zaire, you know what, hell of a thing. The airplanes are broken. We can't fly you out there.
The cameras are definitely broken.
Well, you can bring your camera, bring all that stuff. The problem is a slight challenge It'll take you 22 days to get there. You're going to have to go on rutted roads like this. Or you could take we have the draft of the report we were writing, and there's this luxury hotel over here that we've got a special deal, and we've got this and that. You could get in a car, spend 22 days going out, 20 days. Did I mention the rebels and the landmines and the poisonous snakes
the
and whatever?
Inoculations,
And all that. There. You could do that. Or here's the report. I'm positive that, and then all these people, they get back to their hotel. We can't tell our boss what we really did. We better just. And so you get garbage in, garbage out. Yeah. The only thing that does happen is that the money does indeed get sent outside Norway, outside the United States, to accounts where it just promptly disappears. Right. And yet there's the breastfeeding initiative, there's the AIDS initiative, there's the orangutan initiative, and the this initiative, and that initiative, and the folks at Wellesley and Yale and Harvard and the faculty lounges, they're like, fantastic. We got to get involved with this foundation and this unregulated globalism, which is just crap. Mm. And so I think Trump, we're seeing now Trump is now putting his foot down. We're seeing the beginnings of the tale really being told. This is a great book that addresses, how the swamp attacked Trump, how many fights he had to get through. We haven't yet seen the story told. Maybe I'll try to tell it, others will try to tell it, of what was animating these people to be so nasty to the Trumps.
Well, and that's what Byron said that also stuck with me, is that he doesn't know. It's funny. I was calling a lot of people this morning, and I got the wife of a friend of mine on the phone trying to reach him, and I know she's like super hating Trump and does nothing but watch like CNN and MSNBC, and she was just chewing my ear off about how he's a criminal and the Postmaster General did something with some election, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. You're worried about the post office. The Clintons are stealing so much money and doing so many serious crimes. Like there's this really bizarre thing now where this post office is like a sacred, like why does everybody suddenly have any faith at all in the post office?
Why does anyone use it? I mean, you have email. You have a very interesting chart would be number of pieces of snail mail delivered
that aren't ads.
Well, just in total, let's give them a break. 1994 to the present. Number of pieces of snail mail per capita in the United States. Estimated volume of email.
Right.
Year by year by year. Share of snail mail as a percentage of the total.
Right.
And then cost of sending an email to an average user.
Zero.
Bupkis.
Or
cost,
0.000.
Cost of a stamp.
Yeah,
it's just like, and then the letter and the typing and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it's just, of course, the Democratic interest. We have got to waste money. We have to do this, right? Give us more money to waste. You don't get it.
Well, my friend's wife was telling me that this is how Trump is rigging the election by hiring somebody to be the Postmaster General. It's like, really?
Yeah, there's Eddie Murphy's, at the end of Coming to America, they have the scenes in the Harlem Barbershop. I think there's several movies that also.
Well, Barbershop with Ice Cube.
Yeah, it's hilarious. And that's what those people, some of those conversations are actually funny to listen to in real life.
But these are people who think it's true.
I'm aware of that. That's what you watch on MSNBC and CNN, and you have and ABC and NBC and whatever. But Byron, just to finish on him, please do, those of you who want to get another interesting set of perspectives on this unfolding drama, encourage you to get his book. We've got all sorts of holidays coming up. It could be a nice present.
Yep.
And again, he's a good person, highly experienced, good researcher, excellent writer, and
for the lazy or visually impaired among us, this one is available on Audible.
There you go.
It's actually, if you're driving somewhere or cooking dinner, I love getting the books on Audible and you just listen to them.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Well, another excellent guest. Charles, anything else you'd like to cover before we wrap it up today?
No, I think that's really it. We're waiting on Durham. There are some who think that he may push whatever he's going to do till after the election. There's others who think that's not going to happen. I don't know if we commented about Gowdy's comments before, but there was some chatter that Gowdy said on Maria Bartiromo that he hoped there wouldn't be any more indictments, and people and people listen to that and say, oh my God, he's going soft on us again. And I think really, really why he may be saying this is that the way they're trying to play this is you get somebody to cop a plea. That means you don't have the time and expense and the drama of, the other side throwing shit against the wall and you eventually winning, and there's all this drama in the middle of a tense moment in United States history. So I think there's no doubt that Barr and Durham are probably trying to get more people to just cop a plea agreement in exchange for leniency. And to me, it'll be an open question. I'm not really eager to see a report, but then if the president or Barr asks for a report, and I guess they can do that, I guess we'll see a report. I want to see indictments, and I want to see. I don't want to see the tactics applied against these people that were applied against Jerry Corsi or against Roger Stone. I'm not one of those people who said, well, they brutalized somebody else, so let's, to make up for it, we'll brutalize these people. But I do want to see the full weight of prosecutorial authority thrown.
Oh, we've been waiting, Charles.
I know.
It's the full weight. I don't think we can wait anymore.
Good point. Anyway.
Well, we'll see what happens with that. There was something else very interesting that Byron brought up in his book. He went through the whole thing very methodically. I mean, he's obviously an extremely intelligent guy.
Oh, yeah.
It had a very unbiased feel to it, the parts that I was going through. And, he talks about how Comey met with Trump and told him that he wasn't being investigated, and then he had these. Well, right, he had these things that he had written and things that he had leaked and comments he made over here and things he said to Trump and things he said while he was the FBI director and after he was the FBI director. I wanted to ask him this, but I didn't get a chance. So, lying to the FBI is 18 U.S.C. 1001, lying to a federal agent. Can you just lie to the President of the United States? Isn't he a federal agent, officer, something? Isn't it lying to a federal...
Yeah, I mean, Comey's just a stone cold liar. That's what he does for a living.
Why can't they charge him with 18
Well, they
USC?
should, and I hope he's in the gun sites. Actually, there is an FBI vault, I think, of the files that were taken from Comey's office.
Wow.
Which is an interesting thing to go through at another time. People can, with time, can look at it. Yeah, there you go.
Oh my God, this is the FBI equivalent of cream of wheat, Charles.
Yeah,
I was fascinated as a kid by the box with the picture of the guy on the box, holding the box with the picture of the guy on the box.
No more sugar for you. But anyway, in the cream of wheat. But
records related to the dismissal.
And that's part 2 of 2, so there's a part 1 of 2 too, yeah.
Wow.
And when you thumb through it, you can see he made the mistake, or whoever, he had all these files, and then he titled them. He has an index of his files, and it's interesting to look through the
Why
index.
Why is that a mistake?
Well, because I would have just put A, B, C, D, E as each file, and then I would have had something that I was not so obvious as to what each file contained if it was a super secret thing that I was...
Oh, he's naming it like, this is the file where I lie about Trump.
No, yeah, this is the file on... I forget what, but there are various topics. That are,
oh my God, I have a friend who did that in college with his diary.
Part 2, yeah.
And his girlfriend found it, and I was like, dude, you're an idiot. Why did you write that stuff?
Yeah, I guess it's part 2 you want.
Part 2.
And you'll see, I mean, you just, okay, if you do it in the PDF, it'll be easier at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that long. Yeah, just hit that thing. And then you can scroll through it. You'll see in somebody's handwriting, there's a list of a number of the things. This is all saying, he's acknowledging that
Lego sets to purchase.
Stuff is conscious. Here we go. See? Director's letters.
Wow, they got all his stuff here. Letter from ACLU. Letter dated 7/15/15.
Comey correspondence.
Touch points. Former Director Comey dated letter containing.
There's some tantalizing stuff.
Aspen Institute. What's this?
I think he spoke there.
Wow.
But
I don't trust that Aspen Institute.
I don't either. Should be spelled with 2 S's.
Yeah, they put the ass in Aspen.
Aspen.
Put a pin.
If you keep going down, there's some more tantalizing ones.
Financial audit.
Correspondence let's cross out top. That really makes you like not see the.
It's like written in crayon. Wow. The FBI
It's like,
is so stupid. It's unbelievable.
and this is the receipt for property. Here we go. Here we go. This is the tantalizing one. Top secret. White binder.
Clinton emails.
Top
Wow.
secret. How could you?
Why is that crossed out?
Yeah. Top secret folder. Yellow note. April 24th. What is DRG? I wonder.
DRG. I don't know who in our audience can immediately come up with the idea what DRG. Ginsburg.
Keep on going down. I think there's some more.
Tantalizing boxes of stuff.
Yeah.
Tan envelope.
Presidential Transition Team, 2016. What's that all about? That would probably tell you.
It's amazing to me that in 2020 we've got sloppy handwritten notes here with things crossed out at the FBI. That's the best way they can file an investigation?
I don't know, fish rots from the head, right?
Yeah.
And here, look, White Binder, Webster Commission, 11509. He wasn't in the government on 11509. Comey. He was out of the government.
What's the Webster Commission?
I don't know. Probably on dictionaries.
Yeah. Well,
Cyber
this
readiness.
is interesting, Charles. People, cyber readiness? Oh, yes. Hate to hope.
Who obtained from marked out while going through boxes of Director Comey's gifts.
Hate to hope. Do they dislike hoping, or they want to transform hate into something hopeful?
I don't know. It's got it's catchy.
Hates to hope.
Speeches. Anyway, people will enjoy going through this. Oh, HSBC Holdings.
Ooh.
That's not top secret. I wonder what that's all about.
Man.
List of people we let off the hook.
What?
No, I'm just kidding.
Got to keep that safe, along with the Lego instructions for the Death Star. All right, Charles. Well, I think we've covered quite a bit in today's show. I hope that people will become sponsors on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. There's some things developing that may result in some legal fees that I'll hopefully be sharing with our viewers some more details about that soon. But we've got some very clever people who seem to have figured out my plan to defend myself in lawsuits and are trying to find ways around that. But we'll chat about that another time. Charles, I'm looking forward to Sunday.
As am I, and thanks to Byron York.
Yes, and it will be the 19th anniversary of 9/11. So all of these clowns, James Comey and
That's right, on Sunday.
Robert Mueller. There was another thing before we sign off that was in Byron York's book, was that he was sort of quoting all the different people who were talking about how Robert Mueller's reputation was impeccable. And apparently, according to the book, even Donald Trump was all right with Robert Mueller doing it because he figured, all right, if there's going to be a special counsel, at least he would be fair. How did Robert Mueller get such a good reputation? Isn't it obvious that they absolutely failed to investigate 9/11?
Again, I think you fail your way upward in Washington, D.C. I mean, it would seem that there's a large number of people. I mean, Jeff Sessions was supposed to be this good guy, the first senator in the establishment to support Trump. Oh, we can, this guy will help us. I don't think he helped Donald Trump 1 second.
We just got a comment here that somebody said that Trump called Biden and Harris anti-vaxxers. That's pretty good.
That is pretty good.
All right, Charles. Well, I'll see you Sunday. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll be back. Got a full schedule tomorrow. We're going to have a special presentation from several of the members of the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 inquiry, and they have something new that they're going to be announcing, which I think is going to be very interesting to people who have followed the 9/11 case for the past 19 years. Still remains improperly investigated. So we'll see everybody tomorrow. Have a great night.
Great.